Hello BookTube, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth and I want to do a quick wrap up for the books I read for the ReReadathon and the Borrowathon. The ReReadathon was November 7th through the 13th and it was hosted by Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing, and then the Borrowathon was November 8th through the 14th and it was hosted by rmfickfack. Now when these readathons started, I had already completed 2 books during the first few days of November, and I had been reading Bot Wars. I had started this back in October, put it down for a while, picked it back up, and so for the 7th and part of the 8th, I was finishing this up, and I'm going to do a separate review video for this book because this is one of our Sunshine State books for this year. So for me, I really kind of started both readathons on the 8th, so I kind of just felt like, for me, both of them ended on the 14th. And all of the books that I read, including this one, are borrowed books, so they all met the Borrowathon challenge. And then I also met all of the challenges for the ReReadathon, so let me show you what I read. There were 4 challenges for the ReReadathon. One of them was to read 3 books, and I have 4 books here. Now, I have actually not quite finished 2 of them, but that's okay. This is what I read for the ReReadathon. Now, the first book I finished is Maniac Magee by Jerry Spinelli. This is a Newbery winner. I read this several years ago, and this is the book, I read this for the challenge to give a book a second chance, because I just didn't really feel like I connected with it. I didn't really understand it. It seemed kind of far-fetched to me, and I don't know, for some reason I came away from it thinking that I didn't really enjoy it. Now, in rereading it, I have to say that my opinion of it has definitely increased. I read it with a different mindset this time. I wasn't worried so much about whether it was real or believable. I wanted to see what else the book had to offer, and there were so many other themes in this book that I didn't get before, that because I was too worried about, I guess, whether it was believable or not. And the reason I keep saying that is because it's about a boy who runs away from home and he becomes a legend in the town where he lives. He's basically homeless, although he does have different families that he sometimes will stay with, but he can do all these amazing things in the eyes of the other kids, and he just becomes legendary. So I guess I kind of got caught up in, this wouldn't really happen, you know, a kid couldn't really do all this stuff, but really that's beside the point. The themes in this book were more of diversity and anti-racism and getting along with people and appreciating each other for their value and helping others to appreciate each other for their value and overlooking the differences and just a lot of things like that. So I enjoyed it so much more after reading it a second time, and I'm really glad that I gave it a second chance. So thank you, Aoife, for making us do this challenge, because I think this one was really a good one for me to reread. I did a video of this the other day of myself rereading this book because I hadn't read it in quite a while, and I wanted to see if I could still read it without getting tongue twisted. I did mess up a little bit, maybe 5 or 6 times, but I only had to start over once, and you know, don't even worry about watching that video because it was just something I just wanted to do for fun. I didn't expect it to be anything where I would get a lot of views, and it was just fun to reread. This is my favorite Dr. Seuss book. It met the challenge to reread a childhood favorite and to reread a book that you gave 5 stars to. And this is borrowed from my daughter Emily's shelf. Another one of my rereads, this is borrowed from my daughter Katie's shelf. This is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I've been saying for over a year that I wanted to reread this one, as well as Scarlet, Fairest, and Cress, because I have not read Winter and Stars Above, and I've really, when I say reread, I have actually listened to this on audio, as well as the other 3 that I mentioned. So I wanted to read this in print, and I'm almost done at this point. I feel like I am picking up on a few little details that either I missed because it was on audio, or just details that I didn't pick up on because it was my first read through. Like, it does mention Cress, and it mentions the Wolf Army, and it mentions Winter, and I didn't remember that those characters were mentioned in this book because, you know, they're gonna have a bigger role in the books later on. And it's been really fun to go back and read this again. I'm, like I said, I'm not quite through. I have less than 100 pages left, and I hope to finish it today. So if you have not ever read the Lunar Chronicles, I would definitely recommend it, especially Cinder. This is just really a good book. It's a fairy tale retelling, but it's futuristic, and I just really thoroughly enjoy it. And the last book that I'm currently rereading is Catering to Nobody by Diane Mott Davidson. I listened to the abridged version of this on audio last month. This is one of our Book One Cozy's Club selections for last month, and I am enjoying it. I really did enjoy the abridged version. It was narrated by Mary Gross, who, as you may remember from Saturday Night Live, she's very soft-spoken and witty. This version is narrated by Barbara Rosenblatt, who sounds like Kathleen Turner. So each of these narrators bring a totally different personality to the main character. So it's almost like listening to a different book. But I already know what happens. So I don't know. It's different. It's kind of weird to listen to the full version after you've listened to the abridged. It definitely explains a few things that were a little unclear when listening to the abridged version. But it also seems to kind of drag a little bit. And maybe that's just because I already know what happens in the end. But it seems like it's dragging because it's given me all this explanation, and part of it I need and part of it I don't really, so it's just different. But I am enjoying the story. I think I will continue on with the series. This is about a caterer. She is catering a wake in the beginning of the story, and her ex-husband is there, and her ex-father-in-law, and so there's some things going on there, some negative things, and someone poisons her ex-father-in-law. Well, she's accused of doing it because she is catering the food. And the wake is for actually her son's teacher, who was believed to have committed suicide. But Goldie starts to believe that she didn't really commit suicide. So she's got to try to clear her name and her business because of the poisoning, and at the same time try to figure out who is responsible for the teacher's death and if they are related. So it's a very interesting story and a lot of fun characters, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the book, and so I'm enjoying this reread of the full-length version now, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. All right, just a couple of other borrowed books that I have been reading during this past week. Now, I said I was going to listen to Ink Spell by Cornelia Funk. I did listen to the first disc, but then I was able to get a hold of my book for book club on CD, which is What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty. And so I went ahead and took out Ink Spell and put this in, and I have now finished it because I have book club coming up in just a few days, and I needed to get this done. Now, I really did enjoy this book. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Landlines by Rainbow Rowell, in that they both kind of get a do-over. The premise is different, but it just has a similar feel to it. However, this had much less foul language than Landlines, so I enjoyed it a lot more just for that factor alone, because I was listening to this in my kitchen on my CD player that they can hear all over the house, and I didn't have to constantly go and turn it down or stop it and wait till there was nobody around to finish the story like I had to for Landlines. And now there was just a little bit of foul language in this book, but it was not excessive, so it was overlookable, I guess. Even though I'm not a fan of foul language at all, it was not, like as I said, it was not excessive. Now, this book is about, if you're not familiar with this book, it's about a woman who falls and hits her head at the gym, and when she wakes up, she cannot remember the last 10 years of her life. So her husband, of course, she remembers, but her last memory is when she's pregnant with her first child. And now she wakes up and finds that she has 3 children, and she's getting a divorce. So she doesn't understand why she's getting a divorce. She has to kind of go back through and work through all of these things that have happened. Now, I think this is going to be a really interesting book to discuss for a book club, and I'm looking forward to that. One of the interesting things that I thought throughout this book is that everybody around her thinks that they are exempt from her forgetting them. They get the message that she's forgotten the last 10 years, but they're like, oh, but surely you remember me. And, I don't know why they would think that they're exempt. If she's forgotten the last 10 years, she's forgotten the last 10 years. So it's just kind of funny. Of course, she does remember people that she knew prior to that, like her sister and husband, of course, but she doesn't remember any of the interactions that they've had in the last 10 years. So she doesn't know that her sister's married. She doesn't remember her wedding. She doesn't remember, of course, any of her children, and just things like that. So it's a really interesting dynamic for a book, and I enjoyed the premise. I thought it was very interesting to think about, put yourself in that situation, and how would you react? What would you do? Would you have a nervous breakdown? Would you just work through it and not worry about it? Or, what would you do? So I recommend this book. I think it was very good, especially for a book club. I'm looking forward to the discussion for this book. Now, I haven't read any other Liane Moriarty books, so if you have read several of hers and you would recommend the next one to pick up, let me know. And this also is meeting one of the challenges in the Around the Year in 52 Books challenge. Another borrowed book that I listened to in my car, and now this is talking about abridged books. This is an abridged version, and I don't think I'm interested enough in this book to go back and listen to the full version if I get a chance, but I think I got enough of this story that I don't need to go any further, and I just needed it to meet one of the challenges in my in one of my year-long challenges. This was pretty gruesome in the beginning. It was basically a legal thriller, but of course they had to go through and describe the initial crime, and that was at the very beginning of the book, and I tell you, I almost couldn't go on from there. I was getting sick to my stomach just listening to what was happening initially. It was the rape of a child, and that just really and that was just really hard to listen to. So I almost couldn't go on from there. That's really not what the story was about. The story had a lot to do with racism in a Mississippi town. Other than that, the crime story itself, the legal story, I thought it was well done and well written. I know I've read a couple of other John Grisham books, but I don't know if I've read any of his legal books. I think I did read Pelican Brief, which is, I guess, kind of a legal book, and I read Calico Joe, which is not a legal book. So this is the first one I can recall that I've read that has to do with his legal dramas, which I know is what he's best known for. So I don't know, I may read more in the future. The next John Grisham book I'm going to read, though, is Skipping Christmas. I've got that on my December TBR, and I understand that it's a lot of fun. So this, hopefully it'll be more fun than this one, because this one was not fun. This was pretty heavy. Now I'm kind of curious to see the movie of this, because I don't recall ever seeing it. My husband said he's seen it. He started naming off who was in the cast. Of course, he watches a lot more movies than me, but I have not seen this movie to my recollection. So anyway, this though was somewhat enjoyable after I got past the first part. And then a book that I just finished on Playaway is The Shack by William P. Young. Now, I had mixed feelings about this too. The overall theme of the book, kind of a come to Jesus meeting, that I wholeheartedly agree with. The way that God was portrayed was, a little outside of my belief system, and that's not even really what bothered me so much, but part of it was just kind of boring. There were parts where I felt like the author was trying to teach me about God, and I'm not opposed to being taught about God. I am a Christian, and I certainly know that I don't know a fraction of what there is to know about God and Jesus, but I don't usually get my theology from fiction books. So I kind of found myself closing up a little bit when those parts were on, because I just wasn't really open to hearing things that didn't line up already with what I already believe. And I know that might sound closed-minded, and it's not that I'm closed-minded. I just don't know this author from anybody. I don't know where he's coming from, and I wasn't really open to being taught anything new from a fiction book, I guess is all I'm saying. It's not a bad book. It's very sweet. It's heartbreaking, and it does have some good lessons. It does teach some good lessons, but I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the right frame of mind for it at this moment, because I didn't find myself enjoying it completely. Now, the actual storyline parts I thought were very interesting, but it just moved really slow, and so for that reason I didn't really completely enjoy it. So here's everything I finished and am currently reading right now between November 7th and November 14th. So that's all for this video. Now, in addition to a few other fiction books I've got to finish for my year-long reading challenges, I'm going to delve into some nonfiction, and I also have a special video coming up soon that is all about some nonfiction that has touched my life over the last 50 years. So watch for that video coming soon. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.